No role plays, just real. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader.
We've never really, as a workforce, spent a lot of time on making sure we're developing good leaders.
We'll be able to share stories, experience, mistakes, failures, successes.
This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, on today's episode, I want to talk about something that has been on my mind for a while recently, and this is the idea of imposter syndrome. Have you heard that term before?
I very much have, and I have had it myself, yes.
I would like to challenge you that I have it worse than you, because it's something that I struggle with often. And I was in a pretty robust discussion on Clubhouse, which if you're on Clubhouse, go ahead and find Lorenzo and I on there. I'm at Chris Stark and he's at Life of Lozo, and follow us on there. We're in a lot of leadership discussions when we find the time to get in there. But I was in a discussion around imposter syndrome very recently and heard some great stories from some people talking about what it means to them. And I started to realize that there's a couple of things that I want to bring up about imposter syndrome. One, I think the higher you move up in an organization, or the more people you have that you're accountable for, the likelihood of you having imposter syndrome, I think that goes up. I also think that recognizing that you have imposter syndrome is the first step in realizing what the issue is. But I also don't necessarily know how to move past that, when I'm recognizing it, what's the next step to get out of it? So, I mean, have you ever experienced this yourself? And if so, what'd you do to get out of it?
Yeah, I've definitely had imposter syndrome, many times. And I think for me, when it happens most is when I'm having a conversation or dialogue with somebody and providing them with some advice or some direction on their career. And then I start to think to myself, like, who am I to give this advice? Like, how did I get to this point? Like, how did I become somebody who's like a subject matter expert in helping people, with what they're working on or, accomplishing their goals in their career? And for me to pivot off of that is I realized, I go, okay, I said, wait a second, I'm questioning why I'm here, but I've spent my entire life doing this work. So just making sure that the advice that I'm giving is genuine, authentic, real advice, and that I'm not coming across or maybe just like being kind of one of those, disingenuous leaders who just says the right thing or gives a quote or the motivational speech. Like, I think that's probably when it hits me most, is when I feel like what I'm saying is from somewhere else. Like when what I'm saying is a result of experience, things that I've read, theories, and it's not me. And that's kind of, I think, when I feel it most, and that's when I have to challenge myself. But that's usually when I get out of it. The other times, of course, are like you and I have talked about, is being a podcaster and having this podcast and talking to people and having them come up to me and say, you have this amazing independent podcast. You've been top ranked in iTunes. Like, you get thousands and thousands and thousands of listens a day, of your show. Sometimes, like when they had the article that came for the local newspaper, when they come talk to me about it, like that. Those are the other times when I'm just like, no, this is just me. Like, it's just you and me. We've known each other for a whole lot of years.
Yeah, I like relating hard right now because I know we just launched our new Patreon account and our YouTube channel in the last couple of weeks. So if you haven't checked those out yet, please go do so. But I know those are things that you have wanted to do for probably a year and a half now. Like we hit the 2-year mark, and you started saying, all right, let's think about how do we monetize this in such a way to make it so our current listeners don't feel like they're having a lot asked of them, that we still give out great content without having to, pay for it, obviously. But figure out a way to kind of validate, to say, hey, is the stuff we're doing relevant enough and good enough to where people would pay for it if it was like extra stuff, on top of that. And it was only this year where I kind of was like, almost reluctantly relented into saying, yeah, I guess it's fine. I guess people with lesser shows than ours do it. Why wouldn't it be us? But that was all my, getting out of my own way. Like, just in my head thinking, how do I have the gall to think that I can tell somebody that my stuff is good enough for them to come? And I've had that issue for the longest time. And I started really digging in hard on why I felt that way, because I don't feel that way in other parts of my life. There are other things where I don't get that impression. And I think the thing that is a difference for me is when I really enjoy doing something and I think I'm good at it, but I also think I really enjoy it, it becomes less work. And when something is less work to me, it means less work to me means less effort, and less effort means why would I expect somebody to buy something that was not wasn't effort, So if I, went to school for 15 years to be a podcaster and I, know these cool things, then it's like, oh yeah, now this is what's behind me to say I have the permission to tell people that I have the credibility to talk about this and get people, ask people for money or for time or for whatever it is. But when I don't feel like the effort I've put in is anything more than, I enjoyed doing something and it seemed to work out and I just like it, then why does that mean that it can be, good enough for everybody else? And they're not related at all, but I have a hard time disconnecting those in my own head.
And it's funny because it's a great segue, because one of the things with our new Patreon is that those that, get into tiers get shout outs on the show. And that's a fantastic segue. So just real quick, Crystal, Frank, Carrie, Julie, Charisse, thank you so much for being Patreons. That's a handful of them right now. I'll get them in there, and eventually, over the next couple of weeks here, we'll get more and more names out. But yeah, you're absolutely spot on. Like, just to think that people would want to support us beyond just listening to the show, but actually want more content, want additional content. It's accepting that element of like, we are adding value. People not only enjoy the show and appreciate the show, people want more. They want more content. We're now doing the YouTube channel, like you mentioned earlier. We're now in Clubhouse, and we're doing a lot of leadership conversations, but we're also opening up private rooms for our Patreon members, and then we're doing a public room Sunday nights at 8:30. Come join us, talk about leadership with a bunch of people. So like, there's things that we're doing as a result of the fact that so many people enjoy the podcast. But again, it just seems so kind of weird. I think I've just had to learn to like accept it for what it is. And being a leader of people, when you work in service of people, if people say we want more of this, or we want that, or we want the ability to do this or support you this way, you just kind of do it and deal with it.
Yeah, I think that you hit it on the head with that, because the thing that I like, that where my anxiety peaks up a little bit on, like, what I get terrified of is believing I'm putting out great content when I'm not. Thinking, oh, this stuff is amazing and everybody's gonna love it, and less people are liking it. And I feel like the more it's like, wake up hungry every day. If you wake up hungry every day, you make sure you eat somehow. And if you don't have that, then I think it's really hard for a person to maintain a really high level of performance if they feel like they can't fail. If they feel like there's nothing that would cause anybody to leave them, then you start taking your audience for granted. And I never want to do that. I want to make sure that our content is always amazing. But that leads to that feeling of having imposter syndrome. And I'll tell you, when I post things on LinkedIn, we post things on Instagram, and they're so algorithm driven. So it's really hard to know whether or not something you're doing has a great impact or not. But the thing that does impact me, and I've gone back over the last few weeks since we launched the Patreon and the YouTube to read a couple of things, because I needed to see them for my own reassurance. And that's that we've had dozens of people send us messages over the last 3.5 years to say, I got promoted because of doing something I learned on your show. I got promoted. So whatever extra money or work-life balance or career advancement or all those things, that is real value. That's not like, oh, that sounds cool, and then you walk away and forget it value. There's entertainment value, but real value in impacting people's lives, that's the kind of stuff that I think when I hear more about that, I feel like, all right, now I'm where I should be. We're playing in the right space here. But absent those, it's kind of like really, you hope you're hitting the right spot.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a great point. And I think that, to overcome it to a degree and stay grounded, I think that's the hardest part of this, in my opinion, is like, I don't know that I ever want to not have imposter syndrome. I think It's something that, for me, it keeps me grounded, and it keeps me remembering that, like, all the rest of this stuff in, the social media, the influencer, the followers, it's just stuff. At the end of the day, what you said, which is like, but what's the impact? I'm grateful and I'm thankful that a lot of people listen to the show and subscribe. I'm grateful for every single person listening to this episode right now. Every one of you that follows us on LinkedIn, every one of you that likes our Instagram posts, like supports the show is amazing. But at the end of the day, that's exactly what I want. I was like, just take something away. Take something from the show that you can apply to whatever it is that you're trying to do in life and in your career, to be able to help you continue to be a better leader and provide those types of opportunities for you. I just think that, the essence of the show when we first started was that we just wanted to add value. We've always just wanted to add some type of value. And I think that for me, that's where I would get concerned, is if I stop feeling like an imposter, if I start believing my own BS, if I start believing that the metrics and the algorithms and the followers and all these things, matter more than just adding the value to somebody or some individual. And you're right, man. I think that's probably was the driving force, to really talk about the YouTube channel and the Patreon, was the amount of people that were asking about it, talking about it, saying, you guys should really do this. This would be awesome. You guys got to find a way that, I want to support you. I think there was one message we got a couple months ago where somebody was like, I feel like I should give you a percentage of my increase. You know what I mean? And I was like, oh, maybe if we can get 1% of everybody who gets promoted, we could be balling here. No, but that type of appreciation, that type of impact, the fact that people have, we've gotten them, people have taken the 1-minute hacks and created workbooks with them, created training manuals with them. We've had people reach out and say, hey, just so you know, I do new employee training or I do new leader training, and I assign certain podcasts to people on my team. And I say, you need to listen to the show and then come back and we're going to talk about it. And then, fill out the 1-minute hack and let's go. And so those are the things to me that I know we've always wanted to have happen. Those things that I appreciate the most. But I don't have advice here on how to not have imposter syndrome, because I think that having some of it's healthy.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I agree. I think it is healthy. But it's like a bell curve, it's healthy to a degree, but when you have too much of it, I think it can actually demoralize your team. I think if you're a leader who has imposter syndrome and you're not doing anything to kind of keep it at bay, it can lead to your team seeing, you end up convincing people that you don't belong where you are. If you are so convinced of it yourself and you act like that, people will start to believe your own actions, which speak to that you don't belong there. And so I think it's a real tough one, because you want to have that kind of nipping at you saying, you're not good enough, you need to be here. There's that old, there was a Greek king who hired somebody to follow him around saying, you're stupid, you're dumb, no one wants you, no one believes you, where he hired somebody to do this because he didn't want to and falling victim to what other people before him, which was that you were surrounded by people who just tell you everything's great and you never realize when you've lost people. And so it's a fine balance. But there are absolutely things you can do to have both. I think there's ways to maintain it internally, but also not give the impression that it's consuming you to your people.
I would agree. I think it's important. I think that it's, to your point, it could come across, if you're having it too often, if you're saying things out loud like, I just, I don't know how I'm your leader. I don't know how I got this responsibility. Hey guys, welcome to the meeting today. I have no idea how I even earned this spot, but I'm here, so I guess we'll do some good work today. That's not good, right? That's right. Not what you want to. You have to have confidence. You have to have, some elements of self-worth that you did earn it and you are there for a reason. I just think that, to your point, that's the danger of it, is that it can hold you back. It can stop you from advancing. It can stop opportunities that might happen going forward. And so you brought the example of the kind of the Patreon and, adding more layers to the podcast. Have you ever been frozen from a leadership standpoint, in any type of an example where having imposter syndrome slowed you down or stopped you from either advancing your own cause or advancing the cause of a team?
I've been involved in teams and leading teams when, you You know the old phrase, the Spider-Man phrase, with great power comes great responsibility? There's a reason why we see imposter syndrome higher up among CEOs than we do amongst, entry-level positions, because you're an island, like there isn't like someone else to go to, like, so to speak, to run home to mama to, like it's, you have a problem, the buck stops with you, whatever that is. And I think at any layer of a team, even if you're not the CEO of a company, if it's your strategy that's being implemented, the buck stops with you. Now you can ask for partnership and you can ask for help, and hopefully, a way for a CEO to combat imposter syndrome will be to make sure there are people in the organization where there's a virtual peer-like relationship where people can bounce stuff off each other. It's a very healthy thing to do. And at different layers of the organizations that I've been at, I've really tried to cultivate peer relationships with people who will tell me when I'm doing something that I shouldn't be doing, or when I'm barking up the wrong tree, or that I should think about something else. So I really try hard to do that. But ultimately, when a decision has to be made, if you are the one making a decision, then when I'm the one making the decision, that's when the imposter syndrome rears up, because it's what's telling me, you don't have the right to make this decision, so you're making it, and then when it fails miserably, it's on you, and the first thing people are going to say is, why did you think you had the right to make the decision to begin with? And I think while it's healthy to have that kind of like little devil angel on each shoulder, telling you both, if you only have the one telling you you don't have the right to make this decision, that's really unhealthy. You have to have the other side that says, no, you know what you can do. You've seen your history. You know how people respond to you. You know how people trust what you have to say. They will follow you. You need to make this decision because you are grounding it in values and in information. You're not throwing a dart at a dartboard. Make the decision and then stand by it, and be able to ground that decision in the values that got you there. And I think even if that means that it was the wrong decision, no one will fault you for making it, because they'll understand really clearly why you made it.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, it brings us to this episode's 1 Minute Hack.
The 1 Minute Hack.
All right, for this episode's 1 Minute Hack, here's what I want you to do. I want you to get really good at making sure that every conversation you have with somebody around strategy, that you are encouraging the questions. Whether it be groups of people or just one-on-one, you need to make sure that the people you're talking to have questions about it, and that you become very comfortable with the words, I don't know, as the answer, or finding something out with them. What that does is it lets your people and you understand that you can't be perfect. If you don't know the answer to a question, that means you can't be perfect, and that means you're showing the vulnerability necessary to where you don't feel like you have to keep up this facade. Because keep in mind, imposter syndrome comes from this place that other people think you should be somewhere, and you're worried about being found out. So if you put it out there in the open and say, there's nothing to find out here, I'm not perfect, let's move on, then you are less likely to have that imposter syndrome. Encourage people to ask questions. Get good at saying I don't know to the answer, and you will very quickly develop a team of people who you don't think sees you as this infallible, perfect person. You're much less likely to have imposter syndrome bite you.
Yeah, I think it's a great 1 minute hack. And, I think having the practice of working with your team and being a participant in learning and strategizing together, I think to your point, really brings down that feeling of that you can't make mistakes, or that you must know everything, or that people can catch you, on something that you should know but you don't know. So I think that's a great behavior to have consistently, and then over time, you don't find yourself in those spaces where you're like, what am I doing here? I don't belong here. And it's like, actually, no, like you feel very comfortable there, and it's okay if you get questions or you don't have an answer, because you've done the work and heavy lifting with your team to let them see you in those spaces where you don't feel that weight of responsibility of trying to protect your own ego or your own pride in those situations. Yeah,
we see it time and again in politics and celebrities and everything. People care less about what you did. They care more about how you tried to cover it up. And that's what gets like the kind of the shark circling. And so if you never give off the impression that there's anything to cover up, if when you make a mistake, you're open about it and say, yeah, I messed up, and you show that vulnerability, that gives the impression that there's nothing to hide, there's nothing to cover up. And that's one of the most important things in making sure that you don't have that imposter syndrome when working with your team.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you all next time.